Assalamu alaikum, Layla, and welcome to Rahma with Rose.
Alaikum salam. I'm so excited to be here. This is actually the first time I'm doing an interview, like as a, being interviewed by another Muslim woman as a Muslim woman. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, that just gives me shivers and chills that are so beautiful because I've been such a fan of your two podcasts. And I was literally inspired to create a podcast based on listening to your incredible conversations with people about their ancestors. So to know that I'm the first person interviewing this way just means so much. And it's such an
Mm.
honor to have you here, Layla.
Oh,
Alhamdulillah.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So I'll start with a question I like to ask everyone is, can you remember when you first started getting interested in spirituality?
Oh, I think it's kind of a hard question to ask because it's always been there. And when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind, or the first person that comes to mind, is my mom,
Mm,
because our entire upbringing, she spent so much time and energy cultivating within our house, like this Islamic education. For context, my parents were East African immigrants to the UK. We lived in Wales, Cardiff. It was very white. We
mm,
went to Roman Catholic schools because my parents felt that the education at these religious schools was better. And they were like, even though it's a different religion, at least God is talked about in these spaces. And so we would go out into the world and be different, right? Be Black and be Muslim, and also being given a religious education that was very different to what we believed as our faith tradition. And so I felt like my mom, like when I look back, I'm like, she made such an effort with not only teaching us Quran and Islamic habits, but also helping us kind of understand Islamic stories. And she had a lot of books that at the time I'm like, where did she get them from? But I remember I was thinking about it earlier. They were books published in like from Africa. So they would have been from Tanzania or from Kenya, where my parents are from, that were English, but that were about Islam. And in the 80s, I can't imagine it was very easy to find books like that in the UK. And so they were bringing them over from Africa, but she really made this effort every day. We would read Quran every day. We were talking about Islam. And it was like she was almost trying to counter the education that we were getting outside to ensure that we knew that we were Muslims. And so she tells these funny stories of like, I would come home from school and be like, we have to say grace before we eat, because that's what we were doing at school. And she would have to explain, no, we're not Christian. We don't do that. I have tapes of my mom would record me and my siblings when we were younger because my dad worked away at sea. And so she would record these tapes of that and send them to him so that he could
mm.
listen to us and hear our voices. And I was listening to one, and there's just me in the background just singing, I love baby Jesus, just over and over and over again. Right. And so she knew the education that we were getting there, but she was kind of having to like fill in the gaps for us when we would get back home. So I can't think about Islam and how it originated for me without thinking about my mom.
Mm. That's beautiful. And that's so funny because my son went to a Lutheran preschool and he would sing the Baby Jesus song too.
Yeah.
And then I had to correct at home, right? It's a very popular song. That's beautiful. So your spirituality lies with your mother. Could you tell me more of how did that land with you as a young girl, as a teen? What did it mean to you, especially in a place like Wales, where I'm
Yeah.
sure the community was very small?
Yes. Um, how did it land with me? I think when you're younger, you're not necessarily you don't necessarily like you're not taking a bird's eye view of what's
Mhm.
going on. You just know when we're at home, this is what we're doing. I was lucky enough to have some cousins and some other family members, not many, but at least somewhere. I
Mhm.
was like, okay, it's not just us. There
Mhm.
are other people who are like us. But you're right, the community was very, very small. And it wasn't until so I've moved around quite a bit. I live in Doha, Qatar now, as you know, and I've lived here almost, what year is it? Almost 25 years.
Wow.
yes, but before that, I lived in Wales, I lived in Tanzania, I lived in England, and then, various places across England. And so we've moved quite a bit. And so seeing these different environments, there were places in which being Muslim felt very foreign. And then there were places in which it was like, well, this is what everyone else is, right? And so being a third culture kid,
Hmm.
third culture adult, I think it, like many of us, made us very adaptable, helped us to see the similarities and the differences, makes it so that, we feel like we can fit in everywhere, but also fit in nowhere. And again, I really credit both my parents because my dad, when he would be home from sea, also very active in instilling in us a sense of like knowing who you are at your core, no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
That who you are shouldn't depend on the circumstances that are around you or if everybody is practicing or nobody's practicing. But that should be something that is instilled and ingrained within you. And I really appreciate that they didn't just teach us from the kind of like, these are the rules and
Hmm.
regulations of Islam, although they certainly taught us those things, but also would, even without directly referencing Islam, teach us kind of the characteristics and the habits of how to be as a person. And to this day, I'm really lucky my parents are both alive, they're well, we're very close. And as I've just entered my 40s and I feel like I have even more of an appreciation of the things that they were teaching us. But certainly, especially entering into like preteens, teens, young adulthood, and being a third culture child and moving around so much, um, I definitely will say I had a lot of cultural like identity confusion, and that then connected with how I felt it like as a Muslim. And I think it was hardest for me when I left home to go to university because I spent, years when I was 15 to 18, I was here in Qatar. That's when we first moved here. And then 18, I went back to the UK. I was alone for the first time. And, I'm the oldest, only girl. I had been quite restricted in what I could do. And then suddenly I was in another world. And in my in my in my university, I did have Muslim friends, but we were all just kind of like finding our way. You know what I mean? And so I would say that's the period in which I was least closest to my deen, least closest to Allah. And unsurprisingly, it's also the period where I suffered with the most anxiety and the most depression because I really just didn't know who I was, where I was, what was important to me. I think it's a formative time for everybody, regardless of your, cultural backgrounds, your religious backgrounds, what have you. But for me, I look back on those times and I'm like, that's what it feels like when you really feel that distance from Allah. You feel very, very alone, and you feel like it's hard to make your way back. And I think I had such an understanding at the time that was very binary,
Hmm.
that either I like prayed all my prayers, did all the things, covered my hair, and was like very, very Muslim, very, very visibly Muslim, very, very consistent in my worship, or I wasn't. And I think as I've grown and, I'm having this very beautiful, deeper reawakening in my deen at the moment, and really understanding more of like the spirit of Islam and not just the rules and regulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
Layla, I'm so glad you brought this up so early on in the conversation. First of all, the fact that for everyone post high school, for many people, university is such a formative period. Every single person I've interviewed
Yes.
mentions
Yes.
university or college
Right.
as the time when something big shifted in their lives. I
Yes.
can say the same for myself. But then I love how you identify the fact that for you, Islam was very much a binary religion, right? Good, bad.
Yes, yeah,
wrong, right, halal,
yes,
haram, right? And that's how
yes,
most of us were taught Islam,
yeah,
unfortunately. And it's beautiful that you can openly discuss that. For many people, it's difficult, right, to even talk about these
yeah,
things because there's a lot of shame connected to that. And even to
yeah,
overcome this binary, even if you know it's not true, and to talk about openly is actually very difficult.
yes,
Because the binary is so inculcated and so
yes,
structured within us that to go beyond it is, oh, like, what if? What if? Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I'd love to hear the journey of how you went from, being further from, spirituality in university and then, in your 20s and your young adulthood. And what is your journey from binary Islam to becoming further away and then coming back to it in a more
Mm,
in a deeper way?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I, my journey is very this, right? It's
Mhm.
kind
Of
of all over
course.
the
Yep.
place, right? So, like everyone, right? So it's not a straight line. I do think that there are some important landmarks in my life that kind of helped me to look at things and make some intentional decisions around
Mhm.
things. So one of them was becoming a mother for the first
Mhm.
time. So I was married, I think I was 24. I had my first child at 25. And at that time, I still felt like I was very much, I'd moved back home. I'd moved back to Qatar, but I felt like I was living a double life where it felt like I had the remnants of what was left over from university. And then I was like, I have a job now and I'm living at home and I need to be a responsible adult. Um, but I was kind of like, I cover my hair, but I don't really want to. And
Mhm.
it was kind of, that. And so I felt this like split.
Mhm. Mhm.
But becoming a mother um, made me want to be in greater integrity within myself
Mhm.
and to decide either way, like, am I going to like commit in showing up in my dean in a way that is consistent, that okay, the child is just in me now, just growing, but they're going to reach an age where they'll notice like, you say this but you do this, right? um is that okay, or like, can I just make a decision about who I'm going to be? And so I did, and I'm really grateful for motherhood, for bringing me to that place of intentionality and kind of forcing me in many ways to be like, you need to decide who you are and you need to decide how you want to show up, not just how other people see you, but how you feel about yourself inside. So that was a key point. And a major decision at that time was that I made the decision to wear the hijab actually properly. To other people who may have known me, who weren't very close to me, they would not have noticed a difference because I wore it anyway. But at that point, I was like, no, 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 this is where I actually, it doesn't matter if people who might judge me don't see me, I'm wearing it anyway. Right. So motherhood really brought that out of me. And then I think I'm kind of tracking my journey and how things changed. I wore the hijab for quite a time, and then there reached a time where I just felt this sense of like, I don't think I want to wear it. I don't think I want to wear it. It was really odd because it wasn't something that I invited in. It wasn't something that I was looking for. It just felt like this feeling inside of like something feels out of integrity. And it was hard for me to explain it, and certainly not something that I wanted to share publicly, like my process around it, because I think there's so much, we know that there's so much judgment
Mhm.
about Muslim women and how
Mhm.
we present, how we look, from people who are Muslim and from those
Mhm.
who are not.
Exactly.
Right. And so I couldn't explain something where it was like, it's not that I don't want to wear it because I feel less close to Allah.
Mhm.
It's more like I feel like I made the decision at an age where I was so trying to do the right thing that I
Mhm.
hadn't really considered what my relationship was with Allah. It was
Mhm.
more about like, this is for my child so that my
Mhm.
child sees me as this
Mhm.
consistent human being.
Mhm.
But I haven't really considered like how I feel about the hijab.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because it took some time. I decided to stop wearing hijab, and it coincided with a time in my life where I was doing a lot of healing work, a lot of healing work around my mother wound, a lot of healing work around internalized patriarchy. Um, uh, I started to understand a lot of things about myself around being a highly sensitive person. There was a lot of understanding that was happening. Um, and it what I kept with me at the time, there was also a lot around my spirituality as well, and kind of exploring other types of spirituality and what other people believe. And I never lost the sense of like, I believe in Islam, I believe in Allah, I believe that there are other gods or anything like that. But I was just like, let's just give myself the opportunity to see what other people are saying
Mm-hmm.
and what do I think about what that means. And what I found is that in exploring different forms of spirituality, I could see the same single truth,
Mm-hmm.
just with different faces and in different ways or with different archetypes. Um, but nothing to me felt as, I guess, true or as complete as Islam did. And I'm very thankful for that, that it never got to a point where I felt like, yeah, I don't believe in Islam anymore. I actually want to go do something else. It was in a time where I was like, let me do some analysis, let me do some investigation, let me do some research. And my parents always talked to us about the importance of education and about learning about other faiths, because we each have to be responsible for our deen and our relationship with Allah. Because on the day of judgment, you know, Allah's not going to say, why did you do that? And you say, well, because my mom told me or my dad told me, right? You have to take it upon
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And so that was what that period was for me. Um, and I think from people looking in, I think they were very confused
Mm-hmm.
about what was going on with me. I think they were very like, is she okay? Is she kind of having some sort of like breakdown? Like, what's going on? But I think it was that breakdown to breakthrough
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I came out the other side, I think, with a stronger sense of, I think I came out the other, I'm trying, there's been so many stages, but as I look back, I think I came out the other side with more of a, um, more of an understanding about the, okay, I'm trying to find my words. There was a lot of that was linked to my social justice journey. And prior to that, I hadn't really connected with that, even though I'd grown up Black, I'd grown up a woman, a female, I'd grown up like in primarily white spaces, but I hadn't really connected all of these internalized things that I felt as being connected to social justice, and then how that connects to Dean. And so it all came together. And so I think that was the fledgling of like me understanding like there's even deeper stories here. But I think as I look back from this vantage point now and where I'm at right now, I think I understand even more deeply that social justice is such a key part of Islam. And I
Mm-hmm.
would not have gotten to that understanding had I not made decisions earlier on that looked like I was moving away from Islam.
Yes, that makes so
Does that
much
make
sense.
sense?
A
Yeah.
100%. And actually, I would love to ask you to dive a little bit deeper if you're willing into that experimentation analysis stage, because a lot of listeners on this podcast are seekers. They're trying to
Yeah.
figure out, they're on the healing path. They're like experimenting, seeking, learning, and it's confusing, right? Especially for
Yeah.
Muslims who we've been told what is right, what is wrong, and it seems a little bit heretical to go outside and to go do all kinds of other practices and sit with other communities. So I would love if you're willing to share about a little bit of that period of your life and what you tried out,
Yeah.
who you spent time with, and what you learned from that experience.
Absolutely. It's so messy. That's the word I keep coming back to.
Yes.
Okay, so there were various things. I think a huge part of it was exploring what it meant to be a woman.
Mm.
And it's interesting because now that feels like so not important.
Mm.
I feel because of the healing work I've done over the years, my identity as a woman doesn't feel like this thing that even matters that much. You know what I mean? It's like my soul is not a woman, my soul is just a soul, you
Mhm.
know. But at that time, because there had been ways in which I hadn't understood the ways that patriarchy had influenced what I thought about myself and where I had been given opportunities or where opportunities had been denied or how I was supposed to view other women or all of these kinds of things,
Mhm.
that I really needed to unpack that. And I couldn't find the space within the Islamic teachings that I knew of at the time where I could do that.
Mhm.
And so I found myself exploring it through the world that now, you know, I'm one of the biggest critiques of it, but through the new age spirituality world, because that was the only place where I
Mhm.
saw those conversations having. Now, again, if I hadn't gone down that route, I wouldn't have had the awakening of like, hold on, why is it all white women here? And also, it seems to be a lot of cultural
Mhm.
appropriation of brown and black cultures.
Mhm.
But that was my first step
Yes.
into the water, right? And that's where I began to look at other ways of being
Mhm.
a woman. That a woman is not just like a one-dimensional being. There are many different ways, and one of the things that gets uh, that we're not supposed to be is angry.
Mhm.
Like rage is not something we're supposed to express. No is not something we're supposed to say.
Mhm.
You know, going against like whatever beauty standards or whatever ways of like being pleasing to the male gaze is not something that we were supposed to do. And it was only through these spaces, so through books, through stories, really archetypal stories as well. So things like Women Who Run with the Wolves and kind of those kind of, that
Mhm.
I began to see and hear and understand different stories about women that resonated with a lot of how I felt inside, as always feeling like I was different, always feeling like there was a lot of unspoken emotion, always feeling like I was very sensitive, and always feeling that all these things were wrong.
Mhm.
And so to find spaces and conversations in which it was like, no, this is just a facet of being a woman, and that's okay. I found that very, very healing.
Mhm.
But I would say that was like step one.
Yep.
That was step one because, you know, even as we progress to like step whatever, there's a big difference between rage and being a woman and rage and being a black woman.
Mhm.
And that was a journey I had to make of like, oh, this is why it's always felt even more dangerous to express how I feel, or sensitivity in being a black woman when the world expects you to be strong and
Mhm.
all I've ever had modeled to me is strong black womanhood.
Mhm.
Of course, the fact that I am very sensitive and I don't feel like I can connect to that archetype
Mhm.
explains that. So I let myself explore a range of different things: energy healing, tarot cards, reading about different goddess archetypes. Like there were a lot of things that I was looking at, but always with the sense of like, just because I'm reading it doesn't mean that I have to believe it.
Mhm.
Unless it rings true in my heart, unless it feels like this is a complete truth, I don't have to believe anything. And so I felt a sense of freedom just within myself to be like, it's okay, just read, explore. What's the worst that can happen? If you know who you are, you know who you are. Um, and it took a number of years to do that. And what I will say as well is that in doing that, it I'm smiling because if I hadn't have done that, I also wouldn't be the writer that I am today. I started what is now my Instagram account, which has like, 500 plus thousand people. This was actually a secret account that I started from my main accounts. I had a different main account where I would like, all my family were on it and I would share like, my food and stuff, what we were doing on Instagram back in the day. But then I started a private account where I just wanted to share like writing. Like I would just write things about how I felt, or I would share poetry, or I would share like pictures of crystals, or like images of like powerful women, or whatever the case may be. And it became this way in which it was like a private sacred space in which I could start practicing using my voice in a new way.
Wow.
And so
Instagram as a
because I
private sacred space. I love that. What a
imagine
interesting
that,
way of
right?
thinking about Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And imagine that's the same account that I use today. That has
Beautiful.
evolved so much, with my own evolution. But it be, I always felt like I'd always journaled, I'd always written, but I'd never felt like, oh, other people can read what I have to
Mhm.
say. And this became the first place it was
Mhm.
where it was like, let me practice using my voice, and let me
Mhm.
practice sharing things that I'm working through or thinking about or playing with. And there's no like there's no, I don't have to like mask or perform or be afraid that people who know me in real life will judge me
Mhm.
for what I'm saying. And so it gave me the space to be like, let me practice being myself, and who do I want to be. um and and so like I said, it's like every day I practice using my voice, and then it helped me to become the writer that I am today, because that same very account was the account that started me in white supremacy. It's the same account that I've written and shared viral articles through. It's the same account where we've connected, right? We would not have connected if not for
Mhm.
that. So I'm always in awe of how we say, right, in Islam, we plan and Allah plans, and Allah is the best
Mhm.
planner, right? We think the route to get to here is this very straight line, and it's not. It's this, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, and sometimes I think what we often fear the most, to the point that you were making about people who are being seekers and trying to find new ways. The thing that we fear the most, oftentimes, is not that we will lose ourselves. It's that other people will judge us and not understand
Mhm.
what it is that we're doing, because
Mhm.
they're only seeing the outside. They're not seeing what's going on in our
Mhm.
minds and in our hearts. And they're not seeing that we have that seeker heart, and we're trying to get to truth for ourselves.
Yes, that resonates so
Yeah.
strongly within me, 100%.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think when you get to that truth for yourself, nobody can take it away from you, because you've tried all the things.
Mhm. Exactly.
You did all the things, and you still found yourself in this place, and this is what you believe. And I just think nothing's stronger than that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's really important for others also to hear someone like yourself and how you got to where you are now. So, you mentioned briefly step two. So, step one is the new age spiritual. I remember
Right.
when someone recommended Women Who Run with the Wolves to me like
Yeah.
10, 12 years ago. I remember that
Yeah.
experience, right? We all have
Yeah.
that book somewhere in
Yes.
our bookshelves. That's step one. Step two, you kind of briefly touched upon. It sounds like it's the more intersectional spirituality, social justice oriented.
Yes.
Could you please tell? Because when I watch your post, it really seems to me your spirituality is so social justice oriented, connected. So please tell us more about
Yes.
that and how you not reconcile, but how you kind of managed all of that in one person and in
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will again give credit to my parents as kind of like the grounding foundation of teaching us wrong and right, and how to treat other people, and how to be around other people. And so I have that always as a foundation from which I build upon.
Mm.
And then understanding, and the spark for me was actually 2017. That's when the Unite the Right rally happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is
Mm-hmm.
very far from
Yes.
where I live, has
Yeah, I
nothing to do
remember
with,
that. Yeah.
right? But it just was like this, we never know what that like trigger moment's going to be for
Yeah.
us.
And
And
just to remind
I
people,
just,
that was when there was the KKK rally in
yeah,
Charlottesville, the college town where
mm-hmm,
University of Virginia was.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awful, awful. And I just remember seeing those images of those men, and, you know, just thinking, that is hate. That's what hate looks like. I had never seen it. So
Mm-hmm.
something about the photography of it as well. There was something that was just otherworldly to me. That was like, that's not, that's coming from somewhere else. And how can a human being direct that kind of energy at another human being or other human beings simply because of their difference? And it really struck me that even though that it wasn't like an explicitly anti-Black um, rally, it was against people who are not white.
Mhm.
And what I noticed was that I've been for a number of years in this world of like not only New Age spirituality but also coaching. And I worked in corporate, and then I'd left corporate to become this coach. Was growing a business, is going hand in hand with me using my voice and just sort of coaching women around leadership and spirituality. And the message over and over again was like, we're here to change the world, and the work we're doing is changing the world. And I'm like, this is, how can you not say anything about this? Not a single thing was said by any of the people who were in that field.
Mhm.
And I just thought, that's so weird. You know what I mean? It's so weird. It's so like, it feels almost like intentional. And before that, it all these things always happen to like meet us at the point when we're ready. A few months before that rally, my studies of like womanhood and spirituality and justice, which at the time I wasn't really using that language. It was all like smash the patriarchy, but I didn't understand the patriarchy is just one part. There's all these other things, but had naturally taken me into books and readings by Black women and women of color, and Black people and people of color. And that's when I began to understand or begin to kind of get those seedlings of like, hold on, you're Black, and you do you understand the ways in which you have always tried to minimize your Blackness or always tried to like fit in or have people not, it's not that I didn't want people to know that I was Black, but I was so, there was so much under the surface of understanding that my difference was something that separated me. And so I didn't want that to be something that separated me. But I had started to realize that in doing that, I was really denying my own self. I was really betraying my own self. And I was, there was a feeling of shame around that because I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I was discovering my own internalized oppression, essentially. And that the ways in which I had been taught to strive towards standards of like whiteness and white womanhood that were never made for me. Mm-hmm. And that weren't even like the standard that I was supposed to be to believe it was. Mm-hmm. And so I was already like questioning a lot of stuff. And then this thing happened. And so I'm looking to like, are they going to say anything? Because I'm thinking if it was like an attack on white women, we would all hear about smash the patriarchy. But this is not. And I just thought, what's going on here? And so that's when I wrote an article that went viral at the time called I Need to Talk to Spiritual White Women About White Supremacy. And it went viral. And what was really interesting was I was still a baby in like understanding my own understanding around social justice work. So I was suddenly like inundated with like responses and conversations and things where it's like, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring this out. I just felt this burning need to say something because I'm just sick of the status quo. And I just feel like we need to talk about it. But that then became my portal, I guess, into like this work that I'm in now, where it's like, you were always supposed to be here. You just needed to have a bunch of experiences before, because there's no way, for example, I would have even noticed or been able to speak to the kind of intersectional elements of this had I not explored the other things. There's no way I would have even wrote something in that way and published it. Like I remember hitting publish and thinking, oh, like, at the time, like 2017, you can't say white women, right? You can't say white women and white supremacy together. Now we're like, there's so many books about it. There's so many articles about it. But at the time it was like, no, you can't say that. You know, white women are like perfect. You can't talk about them in that way. Um, so if I hadn't have gone through what I had gone through, I wouldn't have built up that courage in my voice to write that article in the way that I did. And that then became this portal to um, continue to do my own healing work around my own internalized anti-blackness, and while also now starting to advocate and share information and education for other people who are also trying to figure this out. But it was quite a few years there where it was like I'm figuring this out, and at the same time, I have inadvertently become this voice
Mm.
that people think is an authority, but I'm actually still figuring things out for myself as well. So it was a rough period, I think.
Yeah, what a journey to have to do that in the spotlight, right? A lot of us
Yeah,
go through our healing journeys really quietly. I was in a very deep cocoon stage when I was in those stages, and
yeah,
so to do it in the spotlight is an extra challenge. So I can see why, you've continued this path. Could you tell me,
yeah,
so when you entered into this, maybe is that step 2 or 3, this
yeah,
anti-Blackness spirituality, can you tell me to work on understanding this,
yeah,
to work on understand your the nature of oppression? How
yeah.
did you delve into this? What modalities did you use to understand your identity and your spirituality and intersectionality all together? I'm sure others
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
benefit from.
Absolutely. And you know what I will say is really humbling and exciting is that it continues to be a lifelong journey. So I'm now working on my third book
Mm.
where I'm exploring even more different layers around colonialism. And we're also in a time where a lot of there are a lot of genocides happening in the global south, and that's bringing to our attention um, even more like multifaceted ways in which supremacy culture and oppression manifest themselves, right? So every every, every year we grow, every year that we have the privilege to
Mhm.
grow is a year in which we also have the privilege and responsibility to learn more, but
Yeah.
also the world is like showing us more and more and kind of forcing us to have to
Yes.
reckon with it as well. But to your question, so I wrote that article. This is 2017. I wrote that article in and published it. I think it was August. By December, I was completely burned out
Wow.
because when I say it went viral, I mean viral. And suddenly it was like every person. I naively I had thought this will only go as far as people in this field, in
Mm.
this like new age spirituality coaching field. It went so far, people that I'm like, I wasn't even talking to you. You know what I mean? But it hit on so many
Mm.
different nerves that every day it felt like I was battling with people online.
Mm.
It was either people coming at me about what I had written or about what I was sharing, or I found myself in conversations that would go back and forth with me trying to like educate, doing all emotional labor, or I was in situations where friendships and relationships with white women were falling apart, and it was causing a lot of heartbreak. And so within like 3 months, I was completely
Wow.
burnt out. Yeah.
I love.
So December, I decided to take a sabbatical. Never done that before, but I was like, I understand now why people take sabbaticals and completely take time off. And I took the whole month of December off. And what I did was I basically went to the library like as often as possible. And we have a really wonderful library here. And I got out as many books as I could by Black activist writers, Black feminist writers, Black civil rights writers, Bell Hooks, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, like as many as you can
Mhm.
imagine, and just was like ingesting
Mhm.
information because two things. One, I was like, this isn't sustainable. I can't keep doing this. So there must be maps. There must be like guidance that has come before on how to do this because clearly I feel called to this work, but I can't do it in the way that I've been doing it.
Mhm.
And number two, I just felt like I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough historical context. I didn't have enough um, understanding of all the different layers. And I'm a student at heart. So that was my natural inclination
Mhm.
anyway. And so I spent that time reading quite widely, both to understand, systems of oppression, but also to understand um, how people in the past coped with dynamics like this. I will say one of the books that was really life changing for me was Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde.
Mhm.
Reading her essays, I was like, she could have written these today, and this would be just as relevant. And so it made me feel a sense of comfort of like, okay, this is not something that other people haven't gone through. But it also made me feel a great deal of sadness. Like, why are we still replaying these dynamics over and over again, years, decades later? Um, but when I returned, I came back and I hired a coach. It was my first time working. No, that's not right. I had worked with a Black woman coach before, but for a very short period and really just on my business.
Mhm.
This is my first time working with a Black woman coach, and we worked on me
Mhm.
and
Beautiful.
how I wanted, yeah, and how I wanted to show up in the world and what was being internalized within me and how to face it and deal with it. Um, and so that then I think was where I kind of started taking back my autonomy and my agency,
Mhm.
um, where I was like, I don't have to just be this. I don't. What I noticed was that I felt like I was replicating the very oppression that I was trying to fight because I was making myself so available to do all of this emotional labor work,
Mhm.
thinking that that was the only way to do change making work.
Yes.
And what I actually found was like, no, you're in trying to, this was languaging that came later, but in trying to become a good ancestor, you think that you have to self sacrifice so that those who come later don't have to. But actually, those who have come before you have already done so much work so that you don't have to in the same way. And then, secondly, that it's not liberation if I'm not included in it.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is
It's
such an
oppression.
important
If I'm not
message.
included in it, it's just a
Yeah.
continuation of oppression. Yeah.
It's such an important message. And I really appreciate you sharing this because so many social justice activists and many Muslims, especially in the West, who are always as acting as an apologist, to make sure people know that Muslims are not extremists or
Right.
terrorists, that they're humans
Right.
too. This is what I spent
Yes.
many years doing as a professor of
Right.
Islam. And they always forget about themselves. And here you
Yeah.
are reminding us you have to to be able to do this work, you need to be a well-resourced human. And you are part of the
Mm.
liberation. I think you're right. I think a lot of people forget they're also part of it. And they're just
Yes.
like they see themselves as fulfilling a mission, not
Yes.
realizing that they need to be well-resourced. They need to take care of themselves. So thank you for
Yeah.
reinforcing that. And I hope we hear this from you and many other people so many more times because I think people need to hear this hundreds of times before they might actually start practicing this in their lives.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think it's hard because for those of us who those are the kind of people that you're describing, our hearts are so on fire for doing the
exactly.
right thing and
Exactly.
for creating a better world. Um, but we don't often realize that if we haven't investigated our own internalized
Mhm.
oppression, that the way that we're trying to fulfill that mission is a continuation of the things that are hurting us in the same, at the same time. And so we have to kind of break apart. And it's hard because it then goes against the internalized oppression of like, this is how to be good.
Mhm.
This is how to be a good person. It's how to be a good Muslim. It's how to be a good woman. It's how to be all of these things. And you have to risk people saying, well, you're not very nice, or you're being
Yeah.
selfish, or you
Yeah.
only care about yourself, or whatever the case may be. And that's where it comes back to like really knowing yourself, that really knowing that, no, I know that I'm giving myself to the work. And I also know that in order for this to be sustainable, I have to really take care of myself too, because it's strategic to do so, but also
Mhm.
because it's your right.
Yes, it's you're
Yeah,
right. Yes, thank
yeah,
you so much for saying that. And that actually brings me to one of the last questions I have for you. And something I really admire while watching you on social media is you being so open and vulnerable about your need to take care of yourself online. Because I imagine the
yeah,
demand on you of people making requests of you is huge. Because you have so many amazing things to share, and a lot of people want a piece of that. But you so openly spoke about, first of all, unmasking yourself as neurodivergent and the getting
yeah.
diagnosis and taking a break and disconnecting from the world. Can you talk more about um, how that experience was for you? Because I saw that kind of led into perhaps more recently some of the changes you made in your life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Alhamdulillah, today I don't I don't get those like high number of requests. I
Mm.
think partly because of how I set up my like settings. And people can't, strangers can't just,
Mhm.
get to me directly. And I had to learn, first of all, that that's something that you can do, but
Mhm.
also that that's something you're allowed to do. You're
Yes.
allowed to set it up where people can only, DM you if you're following them, for example,
Mhm.
right? Or people can only comment on your post um, if they're following you, right?
Mm.
Or you can block people just because you just didn't like the way that they spoke to you.
Block,
You know
block.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I used to spend a lot of time analyzing, like, is it not being very nice? If maybe they were just like trying to understand, and really, I just had to let go of a lot of that people pleasing, and the fear of being judged.
Mhm.
Because when someone approaches you in a way that you're like, why, you don't know me for you to speak to me like that. I wouldn't allow it in my real life, and I wouldn't engage with it. I just
Mhm.
wouldn't engage with it in my real life. Why should I engage with it online, right? But these were things that I had to. These are like technical changes that I had to make that also came with like internal shifts around. It's okay. You're allowed to. You're allowed to. Um, but then you're right. I think I constantly speak about my boundaries and my self care, um, because I needed people to, well, first, because I needed myself to hear myself say it,
Mhm.
right? So it's first for me, like I needed
Mhm.
to hear myself say it, but then I need people to engage with me to understand you're not going to get this from me. This is what you're going to get. You're not going to get this.
Mhm.
And I think it creates like that transparency of communication, um, that is helpful. Um, but what's really interesting is last year discovering that I'm neurodivergent, and it wasn't a huge, it was like a huge shift, but not a huge shock,
Mhm.
because someone made the comment to me that you've always been making adjustments for yourself. And so, what were like my boundaries and what were my self care and all of these things were actually ways in which I was unknowingly trying to take care of myself as a neurodivergent person, understanding that my capacity wasn't the same as other people's capacity, understanding that I can do things this way, but I can't do them that way, or that certain things that may look hard for people are actually easy for me, but things that may look easy for people are actually pretty hard for me. And so I would make adjustments for myself and say, oh, when we go into this meeting, or if I'm going to be at this during this book tour, or in this interview, um, this is how I need things to be for me to like show up as my best. And that took practice because it's scary to like advocate for yourself if you're not used to it. But I so many times I had so much experience in the past of not doing that, and then paying the consequences, oftentimes with my body. So oftentimes with like my physical health,
Mhm.
or oftentimes with like a complete breakdown. And the the gratitude that I have is like understanding that I'm ADHD, that I'm autistic, gives me language of disability, but also language of like, okay, this is called like you're overstimulated, like this is called a meltdown, like this, and these things are normal. These are a normal part of your experience because you're living in a world that is coming, it feels like it's coming at you all the time, and is
Mhm.
also expecting you to show up in a way, this is where we can go like into capitalism and other things where we're all expected to show up in a specific way that isn't healthy for most of us.
Mhm.
um, so it took practice to get there, but by the time I had the neurodivergent like diagnoses, there weren't very many big shifts that I had to make in my life because I had already been accommodating myself in so many ways leading up to there.
Mhm.
And then the accommodation now has just become like, um, you can do this even more because this isn't something that you need to feel ashamed of. This is this is you honoring yourself
Mhm.
and understanding this added layer of neurodivergency really filled in a lot of gaps that I had in my understanding of myself, right? So I talked about like my journey with understanding myself as a woman, my journey is understanding myself as a Black person, and then thinking my whole life like, yeah, I'm like an able-bodied, person. I don't have any kind of disability at all, and then finding out no, you do, and it actually explains a lot of like what your personality is
Mhm.
as well as what your struggles
Mhm.
are, and that your those struggles, which this is so interesting, these struggles which we didn't have the language for. A lot of women are late diagnosed, right? So if we're very high masking, a lot of women are getting diagnosed later in life. And I think I can only speak in my kind of family and my culture. A lot of the ways in which I showed up, which I can now recognize as like that was autism, that was ADHD, um, was seen as like something's wrong, and we need to make dua, and we need to like, you know, um, do these, do these things because there's something wrong religiously in some way, spiritually wrong with her. That's why she struggles so much.
Mhm.
That's why it often seems like she's self-sabotaging. That's why it often seems like she can't keep up.
Mhm.
um it felt like this lack that needed to be like prayed for.
Mhm.
And so I carried with me for most of my life a sense of deficiency that, yes, came from what the world was telling me as a Black woman, that you're inferior, but also came as like, you're not okay,
Mhm.
you know? And so having this understanding and this languaging and being able to speak with my family about it, and them being like, oh, and thank goodness they've been so accepting, so understanding, and so like, this makes complete sense, right? That it's just opened those channels and made it so that they understand you're not broken, and this is just a part of how you are. And even for myself, saying that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It's just how my brain works.
Mhm.
It's just how my nervous system works. It's just how I understand and see the world. It's just what my capacity is. And it's okay. And so I I'm landing at this place where I feel very grateful to Allah for how I've been made, because first of all, had I not been made this way, again, I wouldn't have had like the material like success of this world. I think the writer that I am and the teacher and educator that I am comes from being neurodivergent and seeing all these different layers and complexities and being able to make all of these connections. But also, even the places where I'm challenged or in which I find things difficult have now become a place where I can, first of all, not judge myself as like, you're doing something wrong, but really when I make dua, when I make salah, when I pray, just asking for support, not from a place of like, because I'm broken, but just, I need support. This is hard for me, or I'm going through something, or I'm trying, and I need that support. And it feels different.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's different because it's not coming from a fear place.
Mhm.
Like when you're divergent and you don't know it, a lot of times you struggle with a lot of anxiety and depression, and you don't know how to explain why you feel that way. And when you come from a cultural background where anxiety and depression are just seen as a lack of closeness to God, um, and then you feel like, yeah, I do feel a lack of closeness to God, right? Because this is making
Yeah.
me feel that way.
Yeah.
It becomes this horrible cycle,
Yeah.
and then you just, whereas now, and I just feel really grateful, Rose, that I've gotten to be as old as I am, and I hope that I get to live a very long life and continuing to deepen in my understanding and in my closeness to Allah, and hopefully sharing things that are helpful to other people as well, because it always feels like it's unfolding, and it always feels like everything is in perfect
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
but it doesn't feel it at the time. But it,
Yes.
I think as I'm where I'm at now with perspective and just a greater sense of who I am, I, I definitely feel more at peace. And even at times where we're experiencing collective trauma right now, we're experiencing collective grief, collective rage. In the past, if I was not at where I'm at right now, when I would have moments where I just feel like I just want to cry and I don't know why, or I just feel so much anxiety and I don't know why, the story I would have told myself about why that was happening would have very much been along the lines of, oh, there's your like, deficiency popping up. There's your like brokenness coming to the forefront. Yet again, there's a like little monster that lives inside of you coming up. And now I'm like, oh, this is my humanity.
Yeah.
This is me feeling the connection with the ummah. This
Mm.
is me feeling that my heart is open and that I am able to feel, and that there's nothing wrong with feeling grief and rage, and actually it's a sign of my humanity, and it becomes an opportunity. And I want to end by like saying I want to choose my wording really carefully. I want what is happening in Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Tigray, everywhere in the world where people are experiencing genocide, oppression, war, ethnic cleansing to just end, right? We advocate for that and we speak to that. And at the same time, if what was happening, especially in Palestine, hadn't been happening, I would not have started wearing the hijab again. I would not have felt this like very strong need to become a visible Muslim woman again. I would not be like, we're going into Ramadan, and the way that I feel about this Ramadan is so different, and the closeness that I feel to Allah, and the sense of like the greatness of Allah, but also the closeness is is just incredible, and it just moves me so deeply. Um, and I hope that this reignition that is happening for so many of us who are Muslim and so many who are coming into Islam as well, really like relights that fire and helps us to connect that with the justice work that we're doing, because we have to be doing our part. Um, yeah, but it's like this shouldn't be happening at the expense of massacres and genocides and ethnic cleansing, and um, yeah, so it's bitter, it's kind of bittersweet because I wear the hijab now. I've had my journey with the hijab, but I wear it with now and I feel such beauty in it, and I feel such symbolism and closeness. And I also now wear it as a sense of duty. Like it's not just me and my relationship with Allah, it's me and my relationship with
Yeah.
Muslim people around the world.
Mm. Oh, Layla, I'm just like I have a million thoughts swirling around my mind with all the beautiful things you've been sharing. I so appreciate this. I really think you're modeling this practice of unshaming. You're unmasking as a process of
Mhm.
unshaming, but you're doing it publicly to help as an educator. You're educating everyone who's watching you and reading your post and who needs to see this because most people are not willing to be authentic and vulnerable online. And when you see authenticity in all of its messiness, like we spoke about,
Yeah.
it really shows other people watching that, they can also engage in this. And it's really just what we're talking about, jihad and nafs, right? This inner
Yeah.
struggle that as Muslims we work on our entire lives is as how do we understand ourselves and struggle with our ego and our desires and all of that, and how do we find this balance is really what you've been modeling for us. So I'm so grateful. And can I wrap up with one question, if you don't mind? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
anyone
yeah.
is,
Before you
um,
do, though, I just
yeah.
want to say I really credit you for creating a space in which, certainly for myself as a Muslim woman, having what has felt like, I felt like I've had a very traditional background, but then also
Mhm.
like a very unconventional
Mhm.
life. And,
Yes.
you have, I really am grateful for you creating a space in which I feel safe to like share all of these
Mhm.
things, and in which your guests who are just like us, also feel like,
Exactly.
yes, that this is who I am, is valid, who I am is worthy. Yeah. Thank you for creating this
Thank
space.
you for that. And I found it so necessary as someone who just doesn't fit into the box. And I was like, where are the other women? And there's so many of us around the world,
Yeah.
many more to come. And I wanted a way that people can find our voices easily. And your voice is so important for people to hear. So I really
Thank
appreciate you
you.
coming on and sharing it in this context, because you said you haven't spoken from this perspective before. So I think a lot of
Yeah.
Muslims will really benefit from hearing your stories, as well as all the other non-Muslims and others listening to it as well. So
Alhamdulillah. Thank
welcome
you.
to this space and this community. My last question I like to ask everyone is, do you have any pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with listeners on anything we've spoken about or any other related topic that comes to mind from your life journey, from your life experiences?
Oh, pearls of wisdom. I think I want to end uh, just in reiterating that, because this has just been so powerful for me, just reiterating that the roots of Islam are the roots of justice,
Mm,
and that it is our duty to model what the prophets who came before us also modeled, which was establishing justice, and what Allah talks about in the Quran as establishing justice. And that means, doing whatever part we're here to play, whatever
mm,
role that we're here to play. For some of us, we've been given gifts where we have platforms and we can speak for them through them. For others, it may be that our gifts are about community building, or about creativity,
mm,
or about one-on-one like relationships, right? But wherever that is like we're here to be that representative. And I'm really grateful to like be able to really see the connection between these two parts of my worlds that are so important to me, and understand that they're not in contradiction. They're actually one and the same. And it gives me a great sense of pride and a great sense of like energy
mm,
as well. Like it gives this very positive energy. And so, yeah, I think the times that we're in now call that forth from us even more. You made a really interesting point earlier around like not you made a point earlier about the ways in which sometimes we try and make people feel comfortable with us as Muslims, as not being threatening, as not
mm,
being, terrorists or whatever the case may be. And understanding that where that comes from is Orientalism,
mhm,
and is a Western standard of morality that, quite frankly, is hypocritical,
mhm,
um, and isn't the truth. So, in our justice work, it's not just about standing up for other people, but also about really examining what are the things that you've been taught to believe about yourself, about your ancestors, um, ways in which you may have internalized a sense of self um, that just isn't the truth, and it's honestly very harmful. And that we don't need to. It's hard because I feel like when we speak up now, we feel this sense of like, not only are people going to come at me, but they're going to come at me because of my faith,
mhm,
or if they're women, because of my faith and because of my gender, right? And so it makes having the courage to speak up even harder. And yes, it is harder. And we have so many beautiful examples throughout our Islamic history and today in the world of uh, you know, uh, Muslim women who did not fit in the box, who did not fit in the box, right?
mhm,
And I have to think about, like the mothers of Islam, like the wives of the prophets, and the ways in which like they were so
Mhm.
unconventional as well in many
Yeah.
different ways,
Yeah.
right? And that is a beautiful example for us.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's just a beautiful example for us. So yeah, just the connection between justice and Islam, and that they're one and the same thing. I
Yes.
think that's what I want to leave people with.
Yeah, well, thank you for emphasizing that. And I think it's an incredibly important point. And I hope people who are listening hear this really loud and clear, because right now we need this message more than ever among Muslims,
Yes,
and to be able to speak out in the ways that they're best able to, right? And to call
yes,
out and call in and to
yes.
find their roles in this in these actions, right? To engage in social justice. So Layla, thank you so much. It was a true honor to have this conversation with you.
Thank
I hope
you.
others benefit as much as I have, and bless many blessings.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rose.